Hey there, and welcome back to Utility Sports. In today's video, we are going over the 2008 NBA draft, and we are doing a complete redraft. If you do enjoy NBA content, this is the place to subscribe. Also, leave a like on the video if you do enjoy the content. So let's jump right into it here. These are the draft results, obviously, from the 2008 draft. So you'll see a lot of busts on there, potentially. And so we are going to kind of go through and, kind of fix what we know today and really make this draft pop. So going at the number one overall pick, the Chicago Bulls selected Derrick Rose. Obviously, injuries hindered his career, but in the redraft, we have Russell Westbrook going number one. Sheldon, kind of give a little reason why you think Russell Westbrook is worthy of being one.
Yeah, some Bulls fans might not be completely happy with this, but my reasoning for Russ going first over Derrick Rose in this is the longevity, the health you had mentioned. Russ has had 3 seasons in his career, averaging a triple-double. He's been very healthy for the most part. He's only missed one season, a majority of one season with an injury. Derrick Rose, remember, he's had years where he didn't basically play at all. Obviously, this image right down here in the bottom right kind of showcases what changed his time there in Chicago. He was on pace to be one of the best to ever play the game. Those injuries really did limit him. If he did not get injured, he would have been the number one pick yet again. He'd be consensus to a lot of people. However, just with that injury, knowing how it did play out with hindsight, I just think Russ is the safer and surefire first overall pick because of his MVP, what he's done for the Oklahoma City Thunder. Even when he was with the Rockets, a very good season there again. I think that with the health, he is worth the first overall pick.
Now looking at the number 2 pick, the Miami Heat selected Michael Beasley. And in the redraft, you have Derrick Rose going number 2.
Yes, I do. And an interesting thing here, the Miami Heat actually did have the best odds to grab the number 1 overall pick. It would have been very possible actually to have seen Derrick Rose wearing a Miami Heat jersey. The Bulls only had 1.7% chance to jump up to number 1. They obviously did grab the Rose from Memphis. However, Derrick Rose goes now number 2 to Miami. Obviously, he's the only other guy in this class with an MVP. He's still a top 2 player in this class when you look at the accolades, what they brought to the city. Derrick Rose was so dynamic, so electric in Chicago in the beginning of his career. It's hard to still not have him going in the top 2. Beasley did not work out there in Miami. Did have some really quality years, though, in his career. But Derrick Rose goes second overall.
At number 3, the Memphis Grizzlies selected O.J. Mayo. And in the redraft, Kevin Love is the pick.
Yeah, definitely an interesting situation here because on draft night, they actually did select Kevin Love, but trade him to the Minnesota Timberwolves for O.J. Mayo. And actually, with Kevin Love coming to Memphis, I think that would actually work quite well. In 2007, they grabbed Mike Conley. Now they would get a front court player. During 2008, they would go on to trade Pau Gasol for Marc Gasol. So you kind of have that center power forward combination moving forward. Both of them can stretch the floor. Both of them gifted passers in different areas. Kevin Love is someone who can, pass as an outlet passer. And obviously Marc Gasol in the half court. I think the two of them would have worked really well together. Kevin Love was a rebounding machine, would have came right in to Memphis, fit that grit and grind style. However, O.J. Mayo did go there, did not quite pan out. Obviously started out really well, as averaging over 18 points a game his rookie year. But Kevin Love is a better pick. Obviously, we've seen him make All-NBA team multiple times. He was a double-double machine early in his career. Really learned how to stretch the floor, and I think he's a really good all-around player and would have fit great in Memphis.
At pick 4, obviously the Thunder went with Russell Westbrook, but in the redraft, Russell Westbrook isn't there, and they go Deandre Jordan.
Yes, Deandre Jordan comes off the board here at 4 now. And this is a little high to me at the first look of it, just because of what he really gives you in terms of his skill set. But during the heart of his career in Los Angeles, during Lob City, he was a 2-time All-Defense member, 2-time All-NBA, multi-time All-Star, and a multi-time rebound leader. It's hard to pass on that here at pick 4. Remember, at this point now, Oklahoma City would have still Kevin Durant. They're looking for that big man. They had made a move for Kendrick Perkins a few years down the road. That would make this would make that move obsolete. Bring in Deandre Jordan, a better, more athletic center, someone who would have fit better into that system there in Oklahoma City. Really big shakeup from what we saw. Obviously, Russ, Mr. OKC himself, gave that city really great tenure there while he was there. But Deandre Jordan would go to them at 4 with Russ already off the board.
At pick 5, the Minnesota Timberwolves, obviously, with Kevin Love in the trade that was leveraged. But in the redraft, Goran Dragic is the selection.
Yeah, Dragic, the first, second round player we've had go, or actually the second rather. Sorry, Deandre Jordan was also a second round pick at pick 34. We have back-to-back second rounders go now here. And Dragic goes at 5. His career did start a little slow. He was behind Steve Nash, but he really started to pick it up 4 or 5 years into his career, especially after his stint with Houston ended. Went back to Phoenix, became their lead point guard, had even a 20-point-per-game season at one point, got named to an All-NBA team. I think that at pick 5, that's about right where his play has granted him to fall. He's been really, really solid for a long time now, and I think at pick 5, it makes a lot of sense for Minnesota to grab him, to grab that franchise point guard.
At pick number 6, we have the New York Knicks. Obviously, they selected Danilo Gallinari, but in the redraft, do you think Serge Ibaka is worth that pick?
Yes, I do. Serge Ibaka just slightly out-edges Danilo Gallinari here. Obviously, Gallinari was a big part of the trade for Carmelo Anthony. However, Ibaka here fits well with what they were bringing in. They already brought in Amari Stoudemire. That was kind of their plan moving forward. Was at that big man position, Ibaka would have fit next to Amari Stoudemire very well. Give them that rim protector next to Amari Stoudemire's offensive prowess early on. Obviously, we've seen Ibaka really grow on the offensive end of the floor as well as his career progress. Remember, he used to be nicknamed the Blocka with how frequently he was getting blocks during the 2011-2012 season. He averaged nearly 4 blocks a game. That's something that we've almost never seen in the NBA. So I think that him at 6 makes a lot of sense for New York. It gives them that defensive presence that they would have needed moving forward, assuming the rest of that would have played out similarly.
At pick 7, we have the LA Clippers, and they selected Eric Gordon originally. Now they actually redraft a player that they've had during their time in Danilo Gallinari.
Yes, definitely. That's an interesting one there. Eric Gordon, again, another member of a really big trade. This one for Chris Paul. However, Danilo Gallinari makes more sense here. He's been the better player, a consistent 50, 40, 90 threat, a guy who can stand and stretch the floor. He's just had a better career than Eric Gordon. He's been healthier. He's a better playmaker with the ball in his hands, and he's a much better stand and shoot guy. I think he would have fit next to Blake Griffin, especially younger in his career, much better than Eric Gordon ended up fitting there. Obviously, the Clippers were not very successful until they got Chris Paul. I think that this move would have propelled them a little bit further moving forward.
Now at pick 8, we have the Milwaukee Bucks. Joe Alexander was the original pick. Now we are redrafting Brook Lopez.
Yes, Brook Lopez comes in, and remember, this guy's been an all-star in the past as well for New Jersey, and then obviously was the only player left basically when they moved to Brooklyn after the whole debacle with Kevin Garnett, Joe Johnson, all of that. The whole thing did not work out. Brook Lopez was their infrastructure, and I think for Milwaukee at this point, that's what they would have been looking for, as an infrastructure-type player. They didn't really have that. Andrew Bogut, who was the first overall pick in 2004, just wasn't really working out. They would have had to go in a different direction. Brook Lopez should have been this selection for Milwaukee. Joe Alexander, many of you might not even know who he is. He was a high flyer coming out of college, really did not work in the NBA, found himself overseas really quickly, and was an absolute bust for Milwaukee in a series of selections that really did not work out for Milwaukee. If you guys haven't checked out our 2007 NBA redraft, that's up on the channel as well. There'll be a card for that right here. But Milwaukee just had a tough stretch here. They could have done so much better in the draft, and I think Brook Lopez would be the guy to move them forward.
Now looking at the Bobcats here at 9, DJ Augustin was the original selection, but now they come back with Eric Gordon, who has fallen.
Yes, Eric Gordon falls from where he went 7th overall, and there in Charlotte, they needed scorers badly. They had Gerald Wallace, they had Steven Jackson, they had that forward presence. They just didn't have guys who could really put the ball in the hoop consistently. I think Eric Gordon would have done that much better than DJ Augustin did. Remember, Augustin had played with Kevin Durant in college. His Texas tape did look very good, but with the hindsight, Eric Gordon was just a much better player in his career, someone who could stretch the floor, put it on the deck a little bit more consistently than Augustin as a scorer. And I think that Charlotte would have been benefited by grabbing Eric Gordon on draft night had that been possible for them.
Now here, we look at the New Jersey Nets, and they obviously selected Brook Lopez. But now in the redraft, we have Roy Hibbard, who at one point in his career looked like a very, very promising young prospect. Obviously played with Paul George on that Indiana team that, went head-to-head with the Heat. Is it kind of surprising he's down here at 10?
It is a little surprising, especially looking at how good Indiana was and how much of an important player he was for them during about 2013 to 2015. You know, two-time All-Star, someone who had so much success. Obviously, his career cut short with injuries, a little bit of a weight issue, and just honestly got phased out of the NBA rather quickly. However, he actually gave LeBron James quite a few problems in their playoff matchups that they had. Lance Stevenson gets a lot of the credit for that, but Roy Hibbert was a really big part of that, protecting the rim. Obviously, earlier in LeBron's career when he was more drive focused than he currently is. And not a lot of players can really say that. Roy Hibbert is definitely deserving of a top 10 pick still in this class, even though his career did end prematurely. But when he was at his best, he was a player that was really dominant inside center. Obviously, the rim protection aspect being the biggest part of that. And I think that the Nets would be comfortable grabbing him at 10 with Brook Lopez now off the board.
At pick 11, we have the Portland Trail Blazers, and they had Jared Bayless as their original selection. Now George Hill, another Indiana guy, goes here at 11.
Yeah, George Hill, he's been the model of consistency since he's gotten into the league. Was a really big piece of those Spurs teams when he was younger, a little bit earlier in his career. Remember, he was a big trade asset actually back in the day. He was the player that got traded for the pick that ended up being Kawhi Leonard for the San Antonio Spurs. But if he came here to Portland at 11, he would have given them so much stability in that backcourt. Obviously, this is prior to Damian Lillard coming in, but they still had LaMarcus Aldridge at this point. I think that they would have needed a backcourt presence like George Hill to come in, kind of ride the ship for them as a lead guard, a floor general, and that's exactly what George Hill's capable of. Also was a quality shooter early in his career, something that has translated well as his career's progressed.
At pick 12, we have the Sacramento Kings. Obviously, the rebounder Jason Thompson was the selection. Now Michael Beasley, a lot of people would be surprised that he is redrafted in the lottery of this class. Kind of break down why.
Yeah, Beasley still goes in the lottery here now at pick 12. And my reasoning for that is he's just a flat-out bucket getter. He's a guy, when he was given the keys to an offense like we saw in Minnesota his first year there after getting traded from Miami, he scored 18 points a night. And his career shooting splits are actually not that inefficient. He shot about 46% from the field in his career, about 35.5% from three. Those are pretty solid numbers for a guy who's capable of getting at least 13 to 14 points a game. And honestly, if he was given the rock, he could probably score upwards of 18 to 20 points a game. Obviously, probably not going to be on a great team when he's doing that. But I still think that there's a lot of value in grabbing a guy who can get a basket when you need one. And Beasley does that here for Sacramento at 12.
At pick 13, we have the Indiana Pacers. Obviously, they selected Brandon Rush. Now, O.J. Mayo, despite being out of the league a little earlier than anticipated, goes here still at this selection.
Yeah, O.J. Mayo does go here at pick 13. Like you had mentioned, the early exit from the NBA, obviously due to marijuana, a big concern, did not let his career really play out the way it was going. Well, he was on a downward trend. It didn't look like he adjusted to the NBA perfectly well, especially as his career progressed. Early on, had a lot of success. He's one of the few guys in this class that had an 18-plus point per game season, and I think that that's still very valuable. Grabbing that here at pick 13 for Indiana. Remember, we had just mentioned their success in between 2012 to 2014. He could have came in, would have been another scoring option next to Paul George and Danny Granger during that time. I think that would have helped Indiana advance a little bit further as well, and maybe give the Miami Heat a little bit more issues in the playoffs.
At pick 14, we have the Golden State Warriors. Anthony Randolph was the original selection. Now they come back with Nicholas Batum, who hasn't put up big numbers, but he's ultimately a contributor everywhere he goes, and he goes a little beyond what the stat sheet says.
Yeah, that's definitely correct. Batum is a guy who, out of Le Mans, France, they didn't really see a lot of him. That's what we tend to notice with a lot of these European guys is sometimes not having that exposure hurts their draft status. And obviously, for some reasons, it's a good thing that maybe it hurts their draft status because there's definitely guys who get drafted from overseas that don't pan out. But Batum's one of those guys that did pan out. He's a guy who was a triple-double threat early in his career for Portland. Really earned that first contract he had in Charlotte. Obviously, the extension is what really did them in when you look at his value there at that point. But he's a guy, he's a capable three-point shooter, a guy who can put it on the deck and facilitate for others. And I think here at 14, that makes a lot of sense. He doesn't really get a lot of love because of those box scores like you mentioned. But watching him, he passes the eye test. He's a guy who's always in the right spot, makes the right play for his teammates. And I think that's something that Golden State would value at pick 14.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. If you did enjoy the video, please leave a like. Also, let us know what class do you want to see next, because we are going to continue this series. Drop that in the comments section below. Let us know what class you want us to redraft. So thanks again for tuning in, and we will see you in the next video.